The Calfax ship had crashed violently into the icy surface of the research station, an asteroid drifting at the edge of the galaxy. When the station's automated distress beacon was activated, the first scans from the outside revealed a massive dark form buried in the wreckage. 20 meters of living nightmare, partially crumpled and unmoving. The galaxy had long whispered about the Calfax. Stories of its destructive power were legendary. Its exoskeleton, tougher than starship hulls, was capable of withstanding entire fleet barrages. Its claws, each longer than a human, could slice through reinforced metal like a hot knife through butter. It didn't hunt for sustenance. It hunted for dominance, for supremacy. No one knew exactly what it fed on. Some speculated it consumed stars themselves, but its reputation was enough to keep most species on edge. No one wanted to be near the Calfax, let alone save it. But there it was, its once immense form now broken and vulnerable. Its massive, fearsome claws were curled against its chest, the talons dull and unresponsive. Its thick scales, which once shimmered like black obsidian, were cracked and marred with burns and deep gashes. The ship's wreckage was silent, save for the occasional metallic groan of the station's stressed support beams. In its current state, the Calfax seemed almost pitiful. The Intergalactic Council was quick to act, though their actions were laced with skepticism. They needed someone who could handle the impossible. Humanity's reputation as relentless problem solvers had spread across the stars. And so, they sent for Dr. Emily Carter. Emily had never been one to shy away from danger. As a combat medic on the front lines during humanity's war with the Zorveni Empire, she had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Savage battlefields, alien diseases, and the aftermath of intergalactic conflict. Her training had prepared her to save life where others would give up. But this was different. She stood before the wreckage of the Calfax, the heat from its massive body seeping into the room, and wondered if she was stepping into the mouth of a nightmare. Her boots echoed as she approached the creature, her breath steady, despite the knot forming in her stomach. The creature was unconscious, its breathing shallow but rhythmic. It seemed almost peaceful, lying there, vulnerable. But Emily knew better. The Calfax reputation was built on the foundation of fear, and fear, as she had learned, could be a lethal weapon in itself. She'd have to tread carefully, and quickly. The galaxy was counting on her. She knelt beside the creature, a million questions flooding her mind. What could bring down a beast like this? What could wound something invincible? As the lights flickered above her, Emily made a decision. She wouldn't just treat its body. She'd try to understand the Calfax in ways no one else had dared before. The medical bay was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of diagnostic machines. The Calfax lay on the operating table, its body an unnatural stillness in contrast to the chaos of its earlier crash. Emily stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the glistening alien technology of the station. Walls of thick, transparent material separated them from the cold vacuum of space outside, but inside, the air was suffocatingly thick with tension. Every scientist, every officer, every technician in the room was watching her, as if expecting her to fail. Emily didn't look up. She focused on the creature in front of her. The Calfax's chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a battle. Its armor-like scales, which seemed impervious to any weapon in the galaxy, were cracked in multiple places. Patches of its skin were discolored and weeping a strange, dark fluid that shimmered like oil. Whatever had brought this monstrous being low was not just physical. It was something deeper, something dangerous. "Is it dead?" asked Captain Reed, the station's military liaison, his voice laced with disbelief. The crew was still unsure of whether the Calfax was alive or merely in a state of suspended animation. Emily didn't respond immediately. She moved to a diagnostic console, her fingers flying over the interface with practiced ease. As she ran her scans, the machine began to ping with troubling results. Irregular neural patterns, abnormal vitals, and a strange, low-level electromagnetic pulse emanating from the creature's body. something that was entirely outside of known biological readings. "It's alive," Emily muttered to herself, though she wasn't entirely sure how. Her mind raced through possibilities. A neurotoxin, a parasitic infection, or something more alien. But whatever it was, the Kalfak was not dead. And for now, that was all that mattered. As Emily activated the medical station's emergency life support systems, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. The council had ordered her here because of her reputation. But now, as she took her first real steps towards saving the Kalfak, the weight of the universe seemed to press in on her shoulders. "Do you have a plan, Doctor?" Reed asked, his arms crossed and his jaw tight with skepticism. Emily turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "A plan. I have to see what's inside before I can make a real decision. Right now, all we know is it's dying." The silence that followed was heavy with uncertainty. Even the Kalfak's shallow breathing seemed to hold its own kind of ominous weight. As Emily prepared the tools for an incision, the creature's massive, black eyes flickered open, locking onto her with an intensity that made her stomach churn. For a moment, she froze. Then, unexpectedly, it blinked slowly, a silent acknowledgement. Emily's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a beast. It was something else entirely. The Kalfak's eyes locked onto Emily with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Despite its massive, terrifying form, there was something almost human in the way it regarded her. She couldn't explain it, but the way it blinked slowly, almost deliberately, felt like a challenge, or perhaps a plea. She swallowed, shaking off the unease crawling up her spine. Focus. Focus. She had a job to do. "Captain, I need you to clear the room," Emily said without taking her eyes off the creature. "And I mean everyone. No one touches anything until I give the word." Reed hesitated, his brow furrowing. He glanced at the other officers and technicians in the room, most of whom looked just as terrified as he did. He wanted to question her judgment, but something about her unwavering confidence gave him pause. Finally, he nodded and motioned for the others to leave. With the room cleared and only Emily and a single medical assistant left behind, she turned to the creature, her expression steely. The Kalfak's massive chest rose and fell with each laborious breath, but it was still, almost too still, as if waiting for something. The tension in the room was palpable, like the calm before a storm. Emily moved to a nearby console, adjusting the surgical instruments. Her fingers shook slightly as she reached for a specialized scalpel, designed for precision, and used to cut through the most durable materials. The Kalfak's hide was nearly impervious, but she had to try. As the assistant prepped the instruments, Emily approached the creature's chest, her eyes scanning its form. It was still alive, but barely. The life signs flickered on the monitor, dangerously low. Every second counted. "Here we go," she muttered to herself, leaning over the creature. She made the first incision, cutting through its thick scales with a slight tremor in her hands. The sound was disturbingly soft, like the scrape of metal against rock, and it sent a chill down her spine. Beneath the surface, she found what she'd feared. A mass of writhing black tendrils, like a parasite embedded deep inside the Kalfak's body. The creature twitched, its muscles tensing as if to retaliate. But then, it stilled again, almost as if it were submitting to her. "God," Emily whispered, her eyes widening. The parasite wasn't just feeding on the Kalfak, it was controlling it. A burst of realization hit her like a tidal wave. The Kalfak wasn't attacking because it was savage, it was fighting something much worse. Her breath caught in her throat. The creature wasn't just dying, it was being possessed. She glanced up at the assistant. "We need to stabilize it now, before it wakes up. Get me the antitoxin for neural invasion. Fast." The assistant nodded, but Emily didn't take her eyes off the Kalfak. Its breathing was starting to quicken. The creature was sensing the intrusion. If she didn't act fast, it might just tear through the station. The assistant scrambled to retrieve the antitoxin, his hand shaking as he fumbled with the medical kit. Emily's gaze remained fixed on the Calthok, whose chest was rising and falling with increasing speed. The massive creature's sharp, jagged teeth glinted in the light, but it wasn't moving aggressively. It was just reacting. The parasite had to be influencing it, but in what way? Was it trying to wake the creature up, or was it trying to tear it apart from the inside? Her thoughts raced, but she forced herself to stay focused. If she didn't stabilize it, the creature would wake up, possibly too powerful to control. And if it woke up in this kind of agony, it would be uncontrollable. The assistant returned with the antitoxin in hand, and Emily injected it into the Calthok's muscular side, directly into its bloodstream. The creature flinched violently at the contact, letting out a low, rumbling growl. Emily tensed, but the growl was not an angry one. It was a sound of confusion, of discomfort, like an animal in the midst of a feverish dream. Its massive head turned slightly, its obsidian eyes locking onto hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The Calthok blinked slowly, and Emily felt the strangest sensation, like the creature was trying to communicate. It was more than just an animal instinct. There was intention behind the gaze. It wasn't just a predator assessing her as a potential threat. There was something deeper, something almost intelligent in its look. "You're not just a monster, are you?" Emily murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the Calthok might understand her. The creature's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, Emily felt a shiver of connection. It was fleeting, a flash of something profound, but it was enough. The Calthok wasn't merely an apex predator. It was a sentient being, trapped by its parasitic invader. This wasn't about hunger or rage. It was a fight for survival. A low, almost inaudible hum echoed from the creature's chest, not a growl this time, but a resonating frequency, like it was trying to communicate in a way beyond words. Emily froze. Was this telepathy? Without thinking, she reached out a hand, slowly, cautiously, as if she could somehow bridge the gap between them with touch. Her fingers hovered just above its leathery hide. The air was thick with tension, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if the whole station held its breath. Then, a strange sensation flooded her mind. A quick surge of images, flashes of alien landscapes, a thriving world, the Calthok standing proud as a guardian of its species. But there were also flashes of pain, of the parasite's insidious spread, of a species in collapse, of ancient wounds. She pulled her hand back sharply, as if stung. "What the hell?" Emily breathed, her pulse racing. She had felt its memories, its intelligence. The Calthok's eyes softened as it blinked again, almost as if it were apologizing. Or perhaps it was asking for help. The room was still, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing as the Calthok's alien memories lingered in her consciousness like an echo. She'd felt the creature's pain, its terror, and something else too, its desperate need to survive. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't some mindless monster. This was a being caught in a battle it couldn't win, a being who had once been a protector, but was now on the verge of collapse, fighting an enemy within that it couldn't shake. She shook her head, trying to clear the images from her mind. Focus. There was no time to dwell on the revelation. The Calthok's breathing had slowed again, but it was still erratic. The antitoxin had slowed the parasite's growth, but it hadn't stopped it. The creature's vitals were beginning to dip once more, and the thick black fluid still seeped from its wounds. "We need more time," Emily said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "I can't keep fighting this infection with what we have here. We need a different approach." Her assistant, a young medic named Niles, looked at her with wide eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "The parasite's spreading faster than we can keep up with. If we don't stop it." "It's not just the parasite," Emily interrupted, turning to the medical display again. "The Calthok's immune system is fighting back, but it's too weakened to handle it. The infection is more than just a biological threat. This parasite is messing with its neural pathways, altering the brain's functions. It's controlling the creature, not just feeding off it. Niles paled. So we're not just treating an infection, we're dealing with a mind parasite. Exactly. Emily's voice was tight, but determined. This parasite isn't just using the Calfox body as a host. It's trying to take over its mind. If we don't stop it soon, the creature will be lost, and we might not be able to stop it from turning on us. If it becomes a fully controlled weapon, we'll all be dead before we even get a chance to fight back. Niles looked at her, fear in his eyes. What are we going to do? Emily glanced at the Calfox's battered form. It was silent now, its breathing slow and steady. But the fight wasn't over. The creature wasn't out of danger yet. We need to stabilize its brain functions, she said, her voice low but firm. We need to flush the parasite out of its system. I'm going to need more than just the antitoxin. I'm going to need something more radical. We're going to have to reset its neural network. Niles' brow furrowed. And you think this will work? Emily turned back to the creature, her eyes unwavering. It has to. If we don't try, it'll never get a chance to fight back. She prepared herself for the next phase, knowing full well that it could either save the Calfox or push it past the point of no return. Emily stood over the Calfox, her hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. The creature's massive body was still, save for the slow rise and fall of its chest, but beneath the surface, the war for control raged on. The parasite had burrowed deep into its neural pathways, interfering with the Calfox's natural biological rhythms, overriding its survival instincts with something far more insidious, and Emily had no way of knowing if her plan would work. She had already administered the antitoxin, but it wasn't enough. The Calfox's immune system was still too compromised, and the parasite's hold was too strong. Emily knew that simply treating the physical symptoms wouldn't be enough. She had to attack the source of the creature's internal battle. She turned to Niles, who was adjusting the neural stabilization apparatus. The device, designed to restore and repair brain functions, was untested on a species as complex as the Calfox. Emily's pulse quickened as she watched him connect the electrodes to the creature's skull. The last thing she wanted was to cause further damage, but without this step, the Calfox body wouldn't survive the onslaught of the parasite's mental assault. "You ready?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Niles looked uncertain, but nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be. If this doesn't work." "Don't think like that." Emily cut him off, her eyes hard with determination. "This is our only chance. If we don't succeed, it's not just the Calfox who will die. The entire station could be at risk." She adjusted the settings on the neural stabilizer, her fingers trembling ever so slightly as she worked. The air felt charged, electric, and she could feel the weight of every decision, every movement. If this didn't work, if the creature didn't survive the procedure, the consequences would be catastrophic. But if it did work, they might just save the Calfox, and whatever sentience was buried within it. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Initiating neural reset in 5, 4, 3. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emily pressed the final command. There was a hum as the stabilizer powered up, the electrode sending a low-frequency pulse into the Calfox brain. For a moment, nothing happened. The creature remained motionless, its eyes closed as if in a deep slumber. Then, a tremor ran through its body, and its chest rose in a violent gasp of air. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The Calfox eyes snapped open, glowing with a fierce intensity, different from the primal rage it had exhibited earlier. It was aware. It was conscious. For the first time, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of connection. The creature's head shifted toward her, and for a moment, the two locked eyes. It was no longer just a monster. It was something more. "Easy," Emily whispered, stepping back slowly. "You're not alone. We'll get you through this." But just as hope began to stir, a deep growl rumbled from the Kalfak's chest. The parasite was fighting back. The growl that rumbled from the Kalfak's chest was deep and menacing, but it was not the roar of a creature ready to tear through its enemies. It was the sound of something in pain, something fighting to regain control of its own mind. The creature's massive claws twitched, scraping against the metal of the operating table as the neural stabilizer sent another pulse through its system. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The stabilizer was working, but the parasite wasn't going down without a fight. Its neural pathways were buckling under the attack, twisting and spasming in a way that made Emily's stomach turn. The creature's entire body shuddered as if struggling against invisible chains, every muscle straining, every vein pulsing with the effort. She stepped back cautiously, her hand still hovering near the medical console. "Niles, adjust the frequency," she commanded, her voice tight. "It's too low. We need to push it higher to break the parasite's grip. If we don't..." "I'm on it," Niles called back, his fingers flying across the interface. He didn't need to be told twice. The stabilizer hummed as the frequency increased, and the Kalfak let out a sound that was halfway between a roar and a scream. A low, vibrating resonance that filled the room. The creature's massive head jerked upward, its dark eyes locking onto Emily. There was something different in those eyes now. Not just the fear or confusion from earlier, but recognition. The parasite was thrashing inside, but it wasn't alone anymore. Emily had broken through. Her heart pounded as the creature's body went still for a moment. The silence was deafening. And for a moment, she dared to hope. But then the Kalfak's chest heaved violently, and a guttural screech tore through the air. It was an agonized cry, raw and primal, as if the creature was in a final, desperate attempt to rid itself of its invader. The stabilizer flickered, its readings beginning to spike erratically. "It's too much," Niles shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "We're overloading the system." "No," Emily snapped, her voice sharp. "We're close. Just hold it together." She grabbed the manual override, her hands flying across the controls with a precision born of desperation. Every second counted. If she lost control of the stabilizer now, the Kalfak might die, or worse, the parasite might gain permanent control. The creature's body spasmed again, the screech turning into a guttural roar that vibrated the walls of the medical bay. Emily gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the screen, watching as the neural reset reached its peak. Then, just as the stabilizer hummed to its maximum, the Kalfak's roar cut off abruptly. The room fell into silence. Emily didn't move, holding her breath. Slowly, cautiously, the creature's chest rose and fell. But this time, it was different. The air was still. Its eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, met hers once more. And for the first time, they weren't filled with terror. The room was deathly quiet. The air seemed thick with tension, but something had changed. The Kalfak's breathing had slowed, and its massive form lay still, no longer thrashing, no longer fighting. Emily could feel her heart thudding in her chest, each beat louder than the last as she watched the creature's dark eyes. The terrifying beast, once a mindless predator, was now simply alive. And for the first time, it seemed fully aware. The Kalfak's gaze was focused, steady, but there was no anger in it. No rage, just an unsettling calm. It blinked slowly, its massive head tilting slightly as if trying to understand her, trying to understand itself. Emily felt a chill run through her, a mix of awe and fear. The creature had regained consciousness, but the war within it wasn't over. The parasite, now flushed from the creature's system, was still embedded in its neural pathways, its final hold weakening. But the Kalfak had fought through it. Emily had helped it take back control. But she wasn't naive enough to believe that this battle was won. The parasite might still linger in the shadows of the Kalfak's mind, dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike. And if that happened, no, she couldn't think like that. Not now. Niles was still at the console, monitoring the Calfox vitals. "Vitals are stabilizing," he said in disbelief, eyes wide. It's holding steady." The neural reset worked. "The parasite's activity is dropping." Emily exhaled sharply, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. It was far from over, but they had made it through the first, most dangerous phase. The Calfox was alive. It wasn't the monster the galaxy had feared. It was something else. Something misunderstood. "Is it safe?" Niles asked hesitantly, his eyes darting from the creature to Emily. Emily nodded, her voice soft but resolute. "For now. It needs time to heal. Time to recover. But it's no longer a prisoner of the parasite." She turned to the creature, her eyes meeting its intense gaze. "We'll keep you safe," she whispered, more to herself than to it. "We'll figure this out. Together." The Calfox blinked again, a long, slow movement, as if acknowledging her words. Then, incredibly, it lowered its head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost peaceful, almost like a nod of understanding. Emily's breath caught. The Calfox, this ancient, terrifying creature, was not a mindless beast. It had been trapped by an alien infection, enslaved by a force it could not understand, just as much a victim as the countless others who had feared it. And in that moment, she realized something profound. The Calfox had not only survived, it had a chance at redemption. The universe had a new story now, one that would be told for generations. Not of a monster to fear, but of a creature saved by the unlikeliest of heroes. And for Emily, it wasn't just about saving a species, it was about proving that even the most terrifying creatures had the potential for something greater. The Calfox had been dying, but now it was alive, and it was free.